As we come to the final week of November, there are extremely powerful shifts occurring in the transiting astrological cycles, especially with the coming cycles during 2026. One of the main key players in all of the dramatic collective and personal changes is the cycle of Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune will form a conjunction in the first degree of Aries next February in 2026. That conjunction in the very beginning of the zodiac is such a powerful statement of a new era opening up. This week, we get a major activation of this cycle because Saturn will be stationing direct on November 27th. So, what does this mean? One of the things about this that's so important is Saturn stationing for the final time in Pisces. When a planet stations, from our perspective here on Earth, and the way we track things in astrology, it appears that the planet is not moving. Saturn has been retrograde since July. That means Saturn has been appearing to move backwards through the zodiac degrees from our perspective here. And now it is standing still, stationing, about to start moving forward again. When planets station like this, they make a major announcement. Their presence saturates the astrological atmosphere. And a planet stationing direct symbolizes a tidal force of momentum beginning to generate to then erupt forward. Because this is the final time that Saturn will station in Pisces. On one level, it's making a major statement about your experience of Saturn in Pisces that goes back to March of 2023. And since March of 2023, collectively, we've witnessed so many systemic structures being dissolved or torn apart or breaking down, or people no longer believing them, people no longer having the same type of belief in various political parties or leaders and the way that they've been dealing with various economic crises or genocides, wars, and so forth. There's been many collective events that have brought a sense of despair and uncertainty, which are themes we always see with Saturn and Neptune coming together. And yet Saturn and Neptune always signal dramatic shifts in the collective psyche, new eras of new senses of collective reality dawning and opening up. And so we've had a great release of the past going on as we feel how we are on this precipice and threshold of a new era coming. Earlier in 2025, when Neptune went into Aries at the end of March and Saturn went into Aries at the end of May, we entered a sense of some of the themes that could be coming more loudly in the years ahead with Saturn and Neptune forming this conjunction. But right now, as we come to the end of November, both of them are back in Pisces. Saturn stationing this week on November 27th, and then early in December, Neptune will station on December 10th. In between that, there will be a very dramatic, visionary breakthrough and catalyzing full moon in Gemini that in many ways is going to bring so many matters to a head. If you are somebody that has been going through a process of disillusionment or wrapped up in various illusions or processes of coming to terms with what you believe, it's a kind of thing that can definitely pierce through the veil of Saturn and Neptune and really cause some awakening or just different tensions or conflicts, really clarifying and making you aware of what needs to change with your beliefs, where you might need to take action. This sense of taking action and developing visions and intentions for the year ahead and all of this dramatic change that's going to be coming is extremely highlighted as we come to the end of November, because not only is Saturn stationing close to Neptune and amplifying the power of this cycle, we also have Mercury stationing direct a couple of days after Saturn on November 29th. And Mercury is stationing as part of a grand water trine involving Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, as well as Jupiter in Cancer. And this week we also have Venus, part of this grand water trine in Scorpio. This is so powerful in terms of recohering, reconstituting, restoring a sense of meaning, a sense of new purpose and presence that could have been emerging for you in these recent weeks of having Mercury retrograde since November 9th. This has been a very dramatic Mercury retrograde that we've been going through. And with Mercury stationing this week, there's all sorts of messages from Mercury coming up as well. So we have messages of both Saturn and Mercury becoming extremely prominent. And they are both part of this extremely powerful grand water trine. So, what does all of this mean? On one hand, it really stresses the importance of paying attention to your own internal processes, really tracking your dreams, tracking the synchronicities that are going on around you, and getting a sense of what it is that you really want to craft and build and forge and create with your life. Mercury and Saturn are powerful allies in this process of building and creating systems and structures, being able to also communicate, order, and arrange and organize our soulful visions and internal desires into concrete plans and formulations for how to get this done. With them both retrograde and now stationing this week, there is this sense of forward momentum happening. And because the grand water trine that's also involved Jupiter in Cancer has been so powerful for internal shifts and internal dissolution, that's also the kind of configuration that could have brought up some disorientation and potential confusion. But the thing about water signs is they are so powerful for regeneration. We think about how water has always been used in baptismal ceremonies as part of a purification. So, whatever has been going on, and I'm sure many of you have many experiences that you can track, basically since the end of October, especially. That final week of October is when this grand water trine really started getting activated. And we've really had it on one way or another going on ever since in this past month. But now, this final week of November, there is a culmination of it with Mercury stationing. And the other thing that's going on with this is not only do we have this grand water trine activated, we also have the presence of Uranus in Taurus activated and amplified, because as Venus moves through this grand water trine this week, she will also be forming an opposition with Uranus. Uranus, like Neptune, is also at 29 degrees of its sign. We have Uranus retrograde at 29 degrees of Taurus. We have Neptune retrograde at 29 degrees of Pisces. These final degrees of the sign are another symbol of how we are on this precipice and threshold of change. Something about the past and the way things have been is dying, and we have this sense of something dramatically new coming in on the horizon. So it's a powerful time to combine this internal processing and reflection with configuring what is it that you do want to create, what needs to be adjusted in your life. And as we come into December with this waxing moon building to an extremely powerful full moon in Gemini, there will be a great illumination and a lot of clarifications can start happening. And this can be really helpful for moving forward through December. December has some really dramatic breakthrough visionary types of astrology going on. And so the more you can use this grand water trine as we come to the end of November to clarify your desires, connect with your inner desires, write out all of your desires if you need to, get in touch with where you have blockages or internal obstructions to getting in touch with what those desires are, or feeling the confidence to go after whatever those desires are, because there is this breakthrough, liberating quality of the astrology happening at the same time. The more you can do that internal processing as we have these powerful shifts at the end of November, the better you will be able to roll forward with the powerful momentum coming through at the end of this year. That's going to be a really ideal year to be setting intentions as we come to the end of the year at the solstice and the turn of the calendar year. This is because there will be a powerful new moon in Sagittarius happening just before the solstice, which is that time of greatest darkness here in the northern hemisphere where I live. And so we really have this amazing ability to do this internal work within our own internal darkness as we come to the end of this year, to get in touch with what we truly want to create with this groundbreaking astrology coming in the year 2026. Because the astrology of 2026 is so powerful, I thought it would be a great time to launch a new course on transits that will help you prepare for the astrology coming in 2026. I have a new course called Mapping 2026 that I will put a link to in the description below so you can read more about it and sign up. This will be a course that on one hand will teach you how to relate to transits and figure out the meaning that they are making and impact they have within your natal chart, as well as specifically plan ahead for the powerful astrology transits coming in the year 2026. My books are also open in the month of December for astrology consultations, and I will put a link below to my scheduler so you can book an astrology reading with me. It's a perfect time to be looking at all of these powerful astrology transits coming in the year ahead during 2026. Like I said, Saturn stationing this week on November 27th is extremely important. While the stationing of Mercury is also very important on November 29th, this stationing of Saturn is the one that stands out to me the most. Because we have Saturn stationing, all of these themes of Saturn can be coming up. This could involve a sobering quality, getting more serious, becoming more aware of the concrete reality, issues at the very foundation of your life. Keeping in mind that what Saturn is really good at is slowly, steadily, patiently building a foundation, doggedly, with great persistence and resilience. And so this is one of the reasons why we're getting such powerful messages from Saturn this week, including the fact, like I said, this is the final time that Saturn will be stationing in Pisces. And so this entire experience of Saturn transiting across whatever it's been doing in your natal chart since March of 2023 is coming through with loud messages this week that are going to show you what needs your attention. So the combination of this with Mercury stationing really emphasizes the need to bring a lot of mindfulness. Just on this slide, I do have some dates which are important to consider relating to the Saturn retrograde process we've been in. It began in July, on July 12th, at just about 2 degrees of Aries. So we started this retrograde with our first stationing of Saturn in Aries, which was really bringing a lot of attention to this new sense of meaning we were having with Saturn and Aries. Saturn and Aries is very different than Saturn and Pisces. Saturn is in fall in Aries. Quality of Saturn being in fall is especially evident in the way that Saturn likes to go slow, and Aries is such a fast-moving, instinctual sign. But Saturn and Aries, that fire quality, can clarify things. It can really help with targeting where we want to take action. Because Saturn is in fall, there's more of a tendency to break out of convention, do the more unconventional, break with the system in some sort of way. So there's all sorts of themes about that could have been activated at that time. Since then, Saturn's been moving backwards in our charts. It came back into Pisces in September. It got to the heart of its retrograde when it is closest to us in Earth, exactly opposite the sun, around the equinox on September 20th and 21st, depending on your time zone, exactly at the same time as a very powerful solar eclipse in Virgo that was opposite Saturn as well as opposite Neptune. That was an extremely disruptive eclipse that was really stirring up a lot of issues and themes related to the Saturn and Neptune cycle that Saturn is now activating. One thing that this does bring up to me is the fact that so much about Saturn and Neptune involves collective belief, and oftentimes we can put our beliefs into something collect individually and collectively, which help prop it up, what helps keep it in reality. The last time they came together, there were so many dramatic, collective, concrete event changes that involved great collective changes in belief, like the Berlin Wall coming down, like the Soviet Union collapsing, like so many revolutions across Eastern Europe, breaking up various communist regimes. When we stop believing in something, things can start changing and shifting. And right now, as we come to the end of November, there's not really a way to know where all of this is going to be going collectively. There's a lot of theories out there, a lot of ideas out there, a lot of fears about what's happening with the economy, what's happening with AI. Are we in this AI bubble that's about to pop? That's something that we're going to see a lot more and hear a lot more about, I'm sure, in December, because of how the Saturn Neptune cycle is so strongly activated by Mars and the new moon and other things happening during December. But the thing to be really curious about right now is, what do you believe in? What are these essential foundational beliefs and values that are being essentialized right now as so much is dissolving as part of this Grand Water Trine? What are you becoming clear about is truly important to you in these foundational ways that you can really build around and cultivate and develop to share with your community? When Saturn stations direct on Thursday, November 27th, it will be part of this extremely powerful Grand Water Trine with Jupiter in Cancer and Venus and Mercury in Scorpio. One reason this is so powerful is Saturn and Neptune are in Pisces. This is the watery home of Jupiter. Jupiter is part of this Grand Water Trine and even exalted. It would lift up the quality of this Grand Water Trine being in that exalted place. And Venus also has an important influence on Saturn and Neptune because Pisces is the exaltation of Venus. And while Venus in Scorpio is in the opposite sign of her home sign of Taurus, Venus does rule the water sign, so she has triplicity dignity there. And she is also one of the rulers of the third decan of Scorpio, these final 10 degrees of Scorpio. And what she can really put us in touch with here at the end of Scorpio is this deep well of desire. The old desires dissolving away, the new desires forming out of that. She's really going to be accentuating this liminal process of release and coming to terms with what is emerging out of this release. Part of that release could be very cathartic in terms of grief and grieving. It also could be part of some really powerful creative process that you are engaging here. And at the same time, she's coming into this opposition with Uranus, which is going to be bringing this great liberating, emancipatory influence, breakthrough ideas. And this influence of Uranus especially can be powerful for essentializing things, putting us in touch with what truly is authentic and essential to be carrying forward into December and the year beyond. And of course, what makes it all even more powerful is the Mercury retrograde cycle coming to an end on November 29th. So not only is Mercury stationing, Mercury is also becoming visible again. Mercury stationed retrograde on November 9th, visible as an evening star, and in the following week descended into invisibility, descended into the underworld. Mercury took on this psychopomp role of guiding us into our own personal darkness and underworld processes, and then was reanimated, regenerated on November 20th at the same time as a new moon in Scorpio that was also part of this Grand Water Trine. So there was a great potential for purification and release and a process of clarification starting to emerge on November 20th. And now, as we come to the end of November, Mercury is regaining visibility. Mercury will start being seen again before dawn, heralding the rise of the sun, at the same time stationing, bringing powerful messages, signs, and synchronicities. Really pay attention to what has emerged now for you to cultivate and develop and create. Mercury is going to be a great ally during December because while Mercury will be visible, Venus and Mars will be moving into invisibility. And then as we come to the end of November, about to enter December, we have Venus really marking and demarcating this threshold by leaving that internal deep watery sign of Scorpio to enter that fiery, fast moving, quickening, and visionary potential of Sagittarius. And as she comes into this fiery sign of Sagittarius on November 30th, she is also getting within 9 degrees of the sun and entering this process of heading quickly, moving fast into combustion with the sun. And over the course of December, she's going to be chasing after the sun, getting closer and closer, and really heightening our capacity to release the past and get a better sense of these new desires that are taking shape and form as I've been talking about. And so all of this sets the stage for an extremely powerful full moon in Gemini that's going to happen on December 4th. This full moon in Gemini is extremely visionary and at the same time could really make you aware of what needs to change about your beliefs. What kind of inner awakenings have you been having? Where have you been caught up in an illusion of one sort or another? And if you're going through some type of disillusioning experience like that, just keep in mind that this process is actually leading you to a deeper sense of personal truth that will ultimately emerge. Now, the reasons this full moon is so powerful does require a little bit of technical information about the lunar cycle. On one hand, this full moon in Gemini is forming a square aspect to the lunar nodes. The lunar nodes, the north node of the moon, which is transiting Pisces right now, and the south node of the moon, which is transiting Virgo right now, they mark eclipses. We had a powerful lunar eclipse in Pisces and a solar eclipse in Virgo in September. One thing that the full moon squaring the lunar nodes is timing. It means that we are in between eclipse season. We had this powerful eclipse season in September. We will have another powerful eclipse season coming in February and March of next year. Right now, we're in between them. And so, because eclipses often mark periods of accelerated change and dissolution, we've likely gotten our bearings now about what did change with that recent group of eclipses in September. And now there's all sorts of lunar material coming up to process with the full moon forming a square with its own node. This has a sense of being at a crossroads, but at the same time having this visionary opening at a crossroads of what needs to change and where you want things to head in a different direction. This is because when the moon forms a square with its own nodes, it's in this really powerful configuration related to its entire orbit around our planet Earth. Of course, when we're looking at astrology, even though we know we're in a heliocentric solar system of our planet orbiting around the sun, we're looking at things from the perspective of these celestial objects moving around us from our own perspective here. And so what we're looking at with the lunar nodes is the intersection of the moon's orbit with the apparent orbit of the sun, which is forming that ecliptic zodiac belt. Of course, What we're really talking about is the intersection of our orbit and the moon's orbit. But when the moon forms a conjunction with the north node of the moon, it means from our northern hemisphere perspective, the moon is moving from being below the ecliptic, that zodiac belt, to being on the ecliptic heading north. It's a dynamic point of change in that way. And then when the moon forms a square to the lunar nodes, which is what this full moon is going to be, the moon has reached her greatest height in latitude relative to the ecliptic. And then we'll start moving down, in which the moon will form a conjunction with the south node, move back down across the ecliptic, then go down to her lowest latitude within her cycle, her farthest point being below the ecliptic when she squares the nodes again. So this full moon is at what is called the northern bending, when the moon is up at its greatest height of its cycle related to the ecliptic. This, again, like I'm saying, really opens up a big visionary perspective. On the other hand, it also really could illuminate a lot of the karmic entanglements we might be part of, all sorts of emotional dynamics and entanglements, and just all sorts of issues in our life that we're in the middle of processing. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy or necessarily pleasant, but it's a full moon that's likely to bring a lot to a head to make us really realize things. Remember, this is a full moon in Gemini, in the sign of Mercury, within a week of Mercury having stationed direct. And so it's this full moon coming after the stationing of Saturn and Mercury. And so it's likely to really awaken and clarify all sorts of things for us. But it's not just that this moon is at the northern bending, up at the greatest height related to the ecliptic. The moon is also going to be extremely out of bounds in northern declination. Declination is connected to the celestial equator if we project the equator of the Earth out into space. So it's more about how far north or south of that it is rather than the ecliptic. When the sun is at the winter solstice, it is at its lowest declination. When the sun is at the summer solstice, it is at its highest declination. If the planets or the moon get higher or lower than the sun at its greatest height at the solstice, they are said to be out of bounds. This gives them a wilder, unrestrained, freedom-seeking, liberating, visionary type of quality. And this full moon being out of bounds, and really extremely out of bounds, to me really heightens the potential for big ideas and awareness and awakenings coming in with this full moon in Gemini. The other thing about the full moon in Gemini is as the moon begins to separate from the opposition with the sun, the moon will be heading towards an opposition with Mars, as well as a square aspect with Saturn and Neptune. It's not like all these insights are going to necessarily be easygoing, pleasant ones, but they're likely to be ones that are calls to action and what you need to respond to and what you really want to forge and resiliently create. And it will likely lead you to getting a lot of information about what's not working, what you can be doing better. The other thing is, not only is this full moon out of bounds, Mars is also going to be out of bounds. Mars is going to go out of bounds at the end of November. So we're also getting this wild, unrestrained, extreme Mars happening here too. Collectively, that could definitely go with some increased conflict. But it also makes me think about in our personal lives, really leaning into that visionary quality of Mars and really letting your imagination run wild with what it is you do want to create in the next year and even the years ahead, and really believe in the potential to use this breakthrough astrology coming in the year ahead to do that, and figuring out what needs to be developed, maybe where you need to pull back right now and focus on laying more of a foundation before that can fully come in. It could really range, of course, depending on where you are with whatever it is, but all sorts of powerful insights and revelations coming forward at this full moon about that. Then what will happen in the week following the full moon is Mercury moving through this Grand Water Trine on December 6th and 7th, forming exact trines with Jupiter and Saturn. At the same time, Mercury reaches max elongation, which means Mercury is now starting to pick up speed and fully pull us out of this retrograde process. At the same time that's happening, this out of bound Mars is going to come crashing into the Saturn Neptune alignment and form a square with Saturn on December 8th, and then separate from that square with Saturn and move into a square with Neptune on December 14th. In between that, while Mars is engaging Saturn and Neptune, Neptune will station on December 10th, which means we get this loud, extreme message from Neptune. The final time we have Neptune stationing in our lifetime in Pisces at that final 29 degrees, and it is being catalyzed and activated by Mars. But that's not the only thing, because at the same time Neptune is stationing direct on December 10th, Mercury is also coming to the end of Scorpio, forming a flowing trine with Neptune, really picking up the meaning of Neptune stationing, yet also opposing Uranus. So this is very likely to lead to all sorts of intense revelations. And really, because we're talking about Neptune here, it's going to be a time of great idealism being stirred up. We'll likely see all sorts of people around us wanting to head off on a crusade of one sort or another based upon their idealistic beliefs. And you yourself might really feel called to take action in some type of area or creative process. But it's also going to be a powerful time for really clarifying your desires, clarifying what it is you want to create with what's actually happening in your reality. And while on one hand, this influence of Uranus can really help us be somewhat unrealistic in terms of thinking bigger, thinking about the bigger picture, not repressing or restraining ourselves from wanting to do more with our lives. We're also though going to need to take that type of visionary quality and access it in ways that are realistic in terms of what we really can create now. So it might be the kind of thing where we get some real big ideas and then we think about, well, how can we scale this back now? And what can we really be focusing on now that's going to end up leading us to these much larger goals? In the middle of December, then we get another shift, which is Mercury leaving Scorpio to enter Sagittarius on December 11th, and Mars leaving Sagittarius to enter Capricorn on December 14th. And so this Grand Water Trine finally comes to an end. And we also gain the strategic courage and action of Mars exalted in Capricorn. This all then leads into an incredibly powerful solstice time period. In the Northern Hemisphere where I live, this is the time of the longest nights, the greatest darkness. It's always an incredible, powerful time for setting intentions for the year ahead. And this year, we have an extremely powerful new moon in Sagittarius occurring on December 19th, only a couple of days before the solstice. And just like the full moon in Gemini was out of bounds on December 4th, this new moon in Sagittarius on December 19th will also be extremely out of bounds in southern declination. And not only will this new moon be out of bounds in southern declination, it will also be very close to the degree of the galactic center and that super massive black hole at the center of our galaxy. So it is a new moon out of bounds, conjunct the galactic center, and also forming a square to Neptune, moving away from a square with Saturn into a square with Neptune. Again, activating this Saturn and Neptune conjunction at this extremely visionary place in Sagittarius. And so knowing this is coming at the end of December emphasizes the importance of doing that internal processing and work here in the final week of November. I hope whatever internal processes of change that you've been going through will reanimate a powerful sense of purpose that you can cultivate as we enter this incredibly dramatic period of astrological change in the year ahead. And to help you plan ahead for these dramatic astrology transits of 2026, I have a new course, Mapping 2026, that will help you plan ahead, help you come into relationship with the impact that the major transits of 2026 will have in your chart, as well as giving you exercises just to help you understand the meaning of transits in general. I'll put a link to sign up for this course and read more about it in the description below. If you'd like to talk about the astrology happening right now, as well as the astrology in the year ahead, my books are also open for astrology consultations. I'll put a link to my scheduler below in the description so you can book an astrology reading with me. I will also put a link to my Patreon. I have an active Patreon community with 3 different tiers. On the lower tier, you gain access to discounts, including a discount on that Mapping 2026 course I mentioned, discounts on working with me, as well as extra content. For example, every week I put out a video on my Patreon going through the astrology of the coming week and what the moon's doing every day that I do not put on YouTube. And so only patrons can access that. On the second and third tiers, the 2 higher tiers, there are also monthly meetings and classes you can learn about by reading more about it. I'll put a link to my Patreon below. Also, if you have not already liked and subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. I recently moved over having 3,000 subscribers, and so we're just getting started here with this channel, and I'd love to experience a lot more growth with it in the year ahead. I would really appreciate you subscribing as well as sharing it with others who would be interested. Well, that's it for this video. Best of luck to you with this extremely powerful Grand Water Trine and full moon in Gemini coming up on the horizon at the beginning of December. I'll be back in touch with you soon.